So if we go back to the rest of our lesson here with lesson 6.3, how does natural selection impact allele frequencies? The last screencast talked about natural selection on single gene and polygenic traits, but sorry, I'm jumping around here. Two of the other ones were gene flow and genetic drift, and how they can change the allele frequency. So genetic drift, gene flow, is migrating into or out of a population. So it's movement of alleles into different populations. Genetic drift is an unpredictable fluctuation in allele frequencies from one generation to the next. So the smaller the population, the greater chance. So if you take a look, this is like the original, this whole large circle is the original population. If, for example, there's like a new habitats colonized, and these are the founding population, they don't necessarily reflect the entire population they came from. But that's really, their descendants are going to look more like the founding population rather than the original population. So we call that the founder effect, and that's genetic drift, kind of due to chance. Another example of genetic drift is something called the bottleneck effect. That parent population and something kind of limits the population. There's a drastic reduction. Could be overhunting, it could be a natural disaster, but the surviving individuals may not necessarily represent the parent population. Therefore, the next generation is going to look different than the parent population. And then just to kind of wrap up, we're going to go into lesson 6.4. How does a new species evolve? Speciation is basically one ancestral lineage into two or more. And so three of the things I need you to understand are isolating mechanisms. And we're going to look at those. There's essentially the ones we're focusing on are reproductive isolation or prezygotic. So something that occurs or prevents fertilization from occurring. So there's two types. There is two or more species reproduce at different times. That's temporal isolation, and the word temporal means time. Two or more populations are separated by geographical barriers. So you can see there before fertilizations happen, they're not going to get to fertilize. So that's going to be geographic. And then another type of isolation is if there's just different courtship rituals or different behaviors and they're not likely to interbreed. It's behavioral isolation. We did spend some time in class talking about why evolution matters now. One of the hot topics is, antibiotic overuse. And we read some information about what antibiotics are used for and how misusing them. And when we say misuse, using them when they're not necessary or not completing a dose, what really happens is the bacteria that are stronger, that the last doses of an antibiotic usually kill, are left around. And those bacteria are antibiotic resistant, and they have created a situation where the strongest survive, and those bacteria survive, and they go on and continue to reproduce, and we're running out of antibiotics to treat those. So it's a real life application of how this information can be used. It is important for you to check out the speciation and extinction video that's listed in an Edpuzzle for you on It's Learning to answer questions to learn more about speciation.